Welcome to Communicate to Lead, the podcast that empowers leaders and aspiring leaders to communicate with clarity and impact. I'm Kele Belton, CEO and successful entrepreneur, and your host for today. I'm here to equip you with all the essential tools and strategies to master effective communication and lead your team to success. As the founder and CEO of The Tailored Approach, my goal is to empower you to be the best leader you can be. So sit back, relax, and join me in today's episode as we dive into the art of communicating like a true leader. Have you ever walked into a high-stakes conversation or presentation feeling completely prepared, only to have your mind go blank the moment it mattered most? You knew what you wanted to say. You had done the work, and yet something stopped you. Here's what might surprise you. That freeze response is not a sign that you're not ready. It's not a confidence problem. It's a brain problem. And once you understand what's actually happening in your body and your mind in those moments, you can do something about it. And that is what we're diving into today. Welcome back to Communicate to Lead. I'm your host, Kele Belton, and I'm so excited that you are here today because today's episode is part of our Women's History Month series, and I could not be more excited about this conversation that I have lined up for you. My guest today is Lilach Mendelovich. Lilach is an audition coach, actress, and award-winning screenwriter who has spent years on both sides of the camera and behind the scenes at some of the top casting offices in Los Angeles. What she discovered in that work changed how she coaches people today, because it turns out the skills that help actors command a room in the highest pressure moments of their careers, well, they translate directly into the boardroom, the conference room, and every high-stakes conversation in between. Lilach is going to walk us through the neuroscience of why brilliant, high-achieving leaders freeze, why you may actually be more susceptible, not less, to it if you are smarter and more accomplished, and the practical tools you can start using right away to show up with authority when the pressure is highest. But before we dive in and before I start our conversation, I want to take a quick moment to ask you for a favor. If this show has ever helped you navigate a tough conversation, show up with more confidence in any room, or step more fully into your leadership, would you take 2 minutes to review the show? Reviews help more women find the show, and that means more leaders getting the tools they need to rise. I'm so grateful for every single review. Okay, let's get into it. Lilach, welcome to the show.
Hi, Kele. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so happy that you're here, and we are going to dive right in. You come to leadership development through the world of professional acting and casting. Tell us more about you. What is the highest stakes environment you have ever managed? And how did that experience change your perspective on what it means to lead under pressure?
So I started as an actor, and I've also had experience with directing, with coaching, with screenwriting, had a little bit of everything in the industry. So the storytelling side of what I do with leaders is kind of where I came in from.
Mm-hmm.
But in being an audition coach in very high stakes situations for the past 11 years or so, that's where my work through psychology and neuroscience developed, because I was finding all these actors who were so capable, so talented. I like to call them the acting class all-stars, where you see them, it's like, how are these people not famous already? But it was usually because there was something in the audition process when the pressure was on, where they just shut down and weren't able to perform at the level that you could see elsewhere in more quote unquote safe situations. So when I became an audition coach and started teaching actors audition technique, that was one of the issues that I really wanted to tackle. And some of the things that I learned over the years were just by trial and error with hundreds and hundreds of people. But as I got more into learning about psychology and neuroscience, partially through my own journey, dealing with stress, burnout, all that kind of stuff, there was a lot of things that I realized, oh, this has been working for my actors for years. And now I understand the brain science behind why it works. So it comes both from the experiential trial and error side and the scientific side, and they come together in a very powerful way. So the past about 3 years I've been combining those, and the results have been really, really impressive. So when I started working with leaders, executives, entrepreneurs, business owners to make sure that their presence in public speaking situations is more impactful and effective and they don't buckle under the pressure, I've been bringing the same tools to them and just using them in a different arena. But the results have been really impressive as well. So that has been something that I want to share with more and more people because there are so many things I feel like we naturally do that feel counterintuitive, but they end up getting in our way. So there are things that we think we're helping ourselves, and because of the brain science, we might be tripping over ourselves or shooting ourselves in the foot. And once we understand how that works, it opens up a whole new level of confidence so that you can work smarter, not harder with your brain and body instead of fighting against it. So that's really where I came into that from.
When you think about your own leadership, have you ever had to manage a high stakes environment or situation where you tapped into these incredible skills and tools that you are using with your clients?
Just in teaching and being in big rooms, I used to teach back at SAG-AFTRA, which is the actor union. They would have yearly sessions in the summer where they would bring in guest teachers. So those were really, high caliber rooms with a lot of people. And you have to show up and do what you need to do. So I use these tools myself when I need to be on top of it.
Okay.
And for some people, it comes more naturally. And for some people, that needs to be a little bit more work. But the main thing that I want the listeners to know is that confidence, everything we're talking about today, is a muscle. So while some people might come to it more naturally, it can always be trained and it can always be strengthened. Just like people who might have it naturally could have it atrophy or vanish from lack of use or lack of practice.
That's music to my ears because that's one of the things I always tell my clients or even my group coaching participants. The more we practice, the easier something gets. Even if it feels uncomfortable initially, the more we do it, that's where the confidence comes from. So I appreciate you saying that. Your work sits at the fascinating intersection of performance and coaching. So at what point did you realize that what you were teaching actors and how they were succeeding were the same tools you could use to help leaders be more successful and more confident?
It's funny. It was my sister, actually. She was up for a huge job interview. And one of the things they asked her to do was put together a presentation. And she called me and she said, I haven't done any sort of public speaking presentation for over 10 years. I don't even know where to start. I'm so nervous because this is like a dream job. And I need to be able to put together something effective and also perform under immense pressure when the entire board is there and everybody's watching you and actually judging you. Sometimes we have presentations where we feel judged, but that's not the energy. In a job interview, you are actually getting judged in that moment.
So true.
I was helping her through it and using a lot of these neuroscience and acting tools to help her. And it was fantastic because she went from feeling so nervous about it to really performing at her highest level. They loved what she did and she got the job. And since then, I've helped her a little bit on other presentations. Actually, very recently, about a month ago, the CEO of the company came up to her after the talk individually just to tell her that the presentation was so effective and so helpful, even though some of the information was very dry and, numbers and all those things. So it was getting a really big reaction from the people on the other side of the boardroom table. And so right around that time, I was looking to see how I can expand my reach and help more people outside of just the acting industry with this knowledge that I've accumulated over the years. And that was sort of an aha moment that it does apply so well to what speakers in interviews, in presentations, in high level conversations are dealing with. And honestly, just being a fellow business owner, we see others struggle with that. I see all these people who are just so brilliant at what they do. And then I see them in a Zoom meeting in the chat being like, oh, I'm just so nervous to put myself out there with that, or to put myself on video on social media, or maybe to run a webinar, a consultation, something where it's more than one-on-one. And so we have all these brilliant people that are getting stopped in their tracks from this growth and this visibility. And so that became kind of a mission for me of, I want to really help those who are so great at what they do, brilliant, smart, capable leaders, make sure that they get the opportunities that public speaking can provide for them, so that that confidence piece isn't the thing that's keeping them from success, but also the rest of us from getting the value that they can provide.
This is so helpful, because I think I'm thinking back to a conversation I had with a client recently around confidence and what it takes to become confident. And she had the idea that if only she could be more confident, she would be fine. If only she could show up more confident, without hesitation, without blanking out, she would be successful. But honestly, she was successful. She was the expert. She's brilliant. She shows up every day. She completes projects. She leads her team. But her disbelief in her own confidence, I found, was one of the things tripping her up. What would you say when you are working with clients, whether it's with leaders in the corporate space or business owners? What are some of the things that trip these incredibly brilliant people?
So I would say that, first of all, when it comes to somebody like your client, there is a piece of their own self-image or how they view themselves and their own confidence that could be in the way. But another thing is, you can have all these people who on paper are very successful. I had a client who was a VP, and again, on paper, very successful, but every time she had to do a presentation, which was required for her job, it was such an internal struggle and so much stress, so much second guessing, so much internal. So nobody else maybe knew that she was struggling so much, but it was just, she called it a torturous experience where on the outside, she looked very successful, but just the amount of time, energy, mental anguish that goes into that feeling of lack of confidence, that is something that especially women leaders, we have enough of on our plate. Like, people, they're juggling so much. If we can cut out some of that internal struggle, those people will have the capacity to grow so much faster and go so much further if we just clear that off their plate. So there's also that element of like, outside growth is one measurement, but also internal calm and peace when it comes to the things that you have to do constantly for your job is a big part of it. Because otherwise that can lead to burnout and other kind of issues that happen in the workplace. And then when it comes to somebody like your client, where it says about, she seems confident on the outside, but there is that lack of confidence on the inside, the main thing we have to do is dig a little deeper and figure out where that comes from and what is the sort of limiting belief or the fear that sort of sits behind. This is where the psychology and the neuroscience side comes in, because it's not just, oh, I look confident, but I don't feel confident. There is something, there's a block there. And there's something in her brain that's telling her this level of visibility isn't safe, or the way that you're doing it is going to get you rejected in some way, shape, or form. A lot of it is perfectionism, I find, with a lack of confidence, where they actually are doing great, but their bar they're trying to clear in their own head is so high that they'll never be able to clear it. And so we're living in a self-fulfilling prophecy. And for some people, it's just something that they hadn't even realized was tripping them up, or a misunderstanding of how they're translating to other people. I have an example. I have a client who is an intuition coach, and her big thing is like, I don't look confident and I feel really bad because I don't keep eye contact for the whole conversation or for the whole presentation. I tend to look all around and it looks like I'm distracted. And it was a really big hang up for her. It's like, people will think I'm distracted, that I'm not present with them. And that will really hurt my authority and the trust that people put in me. And so it's safer to not even be visible because I feel like if I am visible, if I put myself out there, I will harm the trust and the authority that I'm trying to build. So when we dug into it, she realized, I asked her a few questions, we journaled about it a little bit, and she realized that when she's looking around, it's not a distracted thing. It's that she is perceiving other things in the room, people's body language, other energy around the room that she's sort of absorbing as she's talking to someone, especially a bigger group where there's a lot of energy coming at you. And so it was very helpful for her to actually use an acting modality, which we say that you cannot be connected to multiple things at the same time. Just like we know in our brains, we can't actually multitask. We are task switching. And so what she was doing is like you're sort of task switching between connecting to the person and taking in input from the room. But that is what they're there to pay you for because you're an intuition coach. They want you to connect to your own inner thoughts, feelings, intuition, and communicate it back to them. So when you're looking around, if there's a clear communication that what you're doing in those moments is actually exactly what they're here to see you for, then nobody will be upset or think that it's a problem when you're looking around. And just that reframe helped her feel so much more confident to actually become visible and take on all these opportunities to be in the public eye. And so sometimes there's just like one little thing that we have a story about it and it might not even be accurate. I can't know without knowing your client specifically, but most of the time when I work with people, there is some sort of misconception where at some point the story became, this is a me problem. This is something that I do that is not good enough or is a problem. And therefore it's just the way I am. And I'm doomed to behave this way forever. So both of those things are not true. Everything that our brain does operates like a muscle and we can train it. But also a lot of times the thing they thought they were doing wrong or that there was a them problem was actually either something that is just a natural way that our brain is operating, or it was something that wasn't a problem at all if it was reframed in the right light.
You know, that's so interesting. One of the things I often will tell my clients when they come with an issue like that is the very simple thing, have you asked for feedback? Because often what we think people are perceiving or what they're taking in might be so very different from what they are actually seeing or what they're thinking.
Totally. And that is an interesting part coming from the world of performance where understanding how you emotionally impact people was a pivotal part of the job. And what sort of body language, what sort of tone has certain emotional impacts on the people watching you. And so I like to joke that a lot of the work that I do now is acting takes sort of reverse engineers human behavior. And so now I'm just taking that knowledge and putting it back in the right order. What I mean by that is I have to generate natural human behavior and emotion in someone without the natural impetus for it to happen. So you know, your loved one didn't actually get into a car accident, but you need to behave and feel as if they did. And so that's the work of a lot of actors. So we have to reverse engineer human behavior. And so I can take a client like yours and then say, all right, well, let's see how we can use those tools and that knowledge to then get you to confidence, because there are parts of your life where you do feel confident. And so just taking the same tools we use for actors and creating that without the impetus, meaning even in a situation where usually she would feel very nervous, we are tapping into another part of her confidence from a different part of her life and bringing that to the surface.
That is really good. So if someone, for example, one of my listeners, they are listening to us having this conversation and they are thinking to themselves, well, it's great. It's easy for Kele and Lilach to talk about this. How do I actually do this? If someone is nervous about a big presentation, some of my clients often do keynote presentations at conferences, and feeling that debilitating nervousness and anxiety that keeps you up at night. Where do you recommend they start when they are trying to, quote unquote, get over the anxiety and the fear of judgment, the hold that perfectionism has on them where would you have them start to shift or reframe what is happening for them?
So let's get into how they can actually use some of these tools to help them through these presentations when the nerves kick in. So the very first thing that is really important to understand is that everything that your brain does, no matter how annoying or self-sabotaging it may seem, it's always doing to protect you. That is the hardwired setting that it's just trying to keep you safe and keep you alive. And from that perspective, a lot opens up, because when we get to that nervous energy, when we freeze up on stage, that really comes from that fear of judgment, fear of rejection, that we inherited it all the way back from the caveman days, where it was very dangerous to get kicked out of the tribe. So you're very hardwired to equate rejection with actual dying. That's where your primitive brain goes. So it's very natural to have this kind of fear. Honestly, there's about 40% of the population that would say that their fear of public speaking, or the nerves they have when they have to be in the center of the spotlight, is debilitating enough that it really hampers their effectiveness and how they're able to show up. So it's a very common problem, number one. And then we want to understand what is actually happening in the brain when that happens. One of the things you talk about, Kele, in being a good communicator, but also being a meaning maker, is being able to creatively think on your feet, take meaning from one part of the business to another, connect things in a creative way. Those are all parts of our brain that we need access to, as well as memory, in order to be effective. And one of the things that happens when we go into survival mode, meaning when your brain has deemed a situation to be threatening enough to go into fight, flight, or freeze, is that everything your body does diverts oxygen and fuel away from other systems in your body into your muscles, because it's getting ready to run away from a tiger or fight an attacker. It's ready to get to action. That doesn't only mean that, we have an adrenaline rush and we start to sweat. It also means that actual parts of your brain are getting put on standby. That includes parts of your memory. It includes creative problem solving, and it includes all of these things. And so what happens when you prepare for a presentation and you had it, but then the pressure's on and you just go blank? It's not that you did anything wrong. It literally means there's no oxygen to that part of the brain. It is shut off. You don't have access to it, because the body has decided that it's more important to remember how to get to the exit of the building if it needs to run, than to remember that really witty line you had in your presentation. So what we do most of the time that's counterproductive is we get frustrated. We try to muscle through it, to push through it. We tell ourselves, oh no, why are you doing that? What is wrong with me? Let me get back in there. And what happens then is that we are actually adding more threat to the system that already feels like it needs to protect itself. And that's because of one crucial element, which is the threat response system is not built for nuance or for context. It is a very blunt instrument, which means it cannot tell the difference between you going up on a line during your presentation or getting a bad reaction from your boss in a conversation, and somebody coming at you with a knife or a tiger chasing you. As far as your threat response system is concerned, it is all a threat. It also cannot tell the difference between threat to your physical body and a threat to your self-concept or sense of self. And this is where the high achievers, that's why we are more susceptible. Because there's a very strong sense of self that's connected with achievement, it's connected with success, it's connected with being a smart person who's prepared, who's on it. So as soon as something happens that puts you at risk of no longer being seen as those things, even to yourself, then that feels like a physical threat to your safety. Your brain reacts to it the same way. And the final thing is it also cannot tell an external threat from an internal one, meaning when you get frustrated with yourself about how you couldn't remember what you wanted to say, go, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get this right? It can't tell the difference between that kind of verbal or emotional kicking yourself and somebody physically attacking you. There is no difference in the way that it registers in your brain. That is so important for people to understand, because a lot of the times our behavior when we are trying to get ourselves muscle through to get to the performance that we want
Mhm.
We are actually taking a system that's already feeling under threat and we're creating a whole additional layer of a threat, right? We are now
Mhm.
the attacker of ourselves. And that leads
Mhm.
me to the most important element of how we get past it. Now that we understand that, now I can have that image of, oh, when I am being hard with myself, my brain is looking at me like I'm coming at myself with a knife or with a weapon. I need to understand that I have to approach it a slightly different way.
Mhm.
And so this is where self-compassion comes in and is very, very effective. There's about 20 years of research pioneered by Kristen Neff that it is so much more effective, both for your motivation, for your output, and how confident and also just how impactful you are when you approach your difficulties with self-compassion and speak to yourself the way that you would somebody that you're mentoring, a friend, a loved one, even a child, rather than being hard with ourselves, because then we take that element of additional threat away from the system.
This is so good. I'm taking some notes so that I remember when you were talking about your high achievers, the sense of self being tied to success. It's essentially part of their identity. When you quote unquote fail, that it becomes part of your identity being threatened.
Exactly.
If you are saying self-compassion is the way to do it and putting ourselves in the shoes where we would show compassion to a friend, to someone we're mentoring, maybe even to a loved one, I understand the concept. How do you help a woman leader who struggles to apply that to herself? That self-compassion.
Great. So Dr. Kristen Neff, one of her go-to exercises is called a self-compassion break, which involves 3 elements. It's mindfulness or awareness. So acknowledging what is happening in the moment instead of trying to ignore it or push it down or push it away. Then we have common humanity, which is about feeling less alone in the thing that is bothering us. And finally, self-kindness, which is making sure that we are actually giving ourselves what we need, not necessarily what we want to happen, not pushing ourselves into something that's uncomfortable. So an example of this is, let's say I'm feeling really nervous before a big presentation and I'm worried about not being able to deliver. It's very simply just saying, this is a moment of suffering. It's really scary to put yourself out there. I wish I didn't feel this way. Let's acknowledge the fact that I wish I was past this by now. Then I can say, but so many people deal with this as well. I'm not the only one. And struggle, feeling challenged, feeling pushed to your limit is part of life. And that's how we grow. It's a natural part of how humanity evolves. Then I have to ask myself, can I be kind to myself? May I give myself what I need? Which allows your nervous system calm down just enough to think clearly and say, okay, maybe what I need right now is to go over my points one more time. Or maybe what I need right now is actually to go for a walk and just get some of these jitters out of my body. Or maybe what I need right now is to go get a pep talk from a trusted friend or mentor. But we can't get to the point that we have enough clarity to think, what do I actually need right now when we're in the threat response system, when we're in survival mode? That part of your brain that can tell you, this is what you need to feel better. This is what will help you perform at your best. We don't have access to that part of ourselves until we settle the nervous system down a little bit. So I do want to talk about that for a second, because this is an image that was very helpful to some of my clients. And I told them, when your nervous system is in survival mode, you want to think about it like a toddler that's having a tantrum.
That's a good image. I like that. I can totally see that.
Definitely. I was thinking about a story where I went to visit my sister and my nephew, who was a toddler, his ball rolled into the street and she, of course, stopped him from going to get it. At the time when he was throwing a tantrum about his beloved ball being in the street, when she tried to tell him it's not safe in the street, there are cars in the street, he could not take that input in, because when the brain is in survival mode, it is no longer accepting that kind of rational input, right? It's just stay alive, stay safe. So we have to calm it down. We have to calm the body and the brain down enough for it to absorb rational conversation. If you're thinking about your brain when it is in survival mode, in fight, flight, or freeze as a toddler that is in the middle of a tantrum, you have to speak to it in the language that it understands, which is physical. So we first have to create a sense of safety in the body because mind and body are connected, but the brain is no longer taking kind of logical input. So we have to access the system through the body instead.
So how do we do that because that's really helpful. When we are in a fight or flight or freeze mode, we can't really take in parts of anything rational is not registering in our brains. How do we do this for ourselves? What do we need to do actively to bring our nervous system back to regulation so that we can unlock our rational brain again?
It's actually very fun for me to share it with you because some of these things are so simple. And it's very impressive how quickly they work. So something as simple as certain breathing exercises. Now, it has to be specific breathing exercises because our brain associates different emotions and different mental states with certain breathing patterns. So there are specific breathing patterns and breathing exercises you can do that slows you down and it actually telegraphs to your brain that you are in a calm, safe state. So it sort of overrides the survival mode in a way, or tells it, hey, we're good, we're fine. Some of those breathing exercises, there is the box breathing, which is used by Navy SEALs to stay calm, which can be done in a 4 or 5 hold pattern. The 5 hold would be inhale for 5, hold for 5, exhale for 5, hold for 5. And you go around the box at least 3 times. Usually 3 will get you enough to the point where your nervous system starts to settle, but you can do a little bit more until you start to feel the effect. Another one is the 4-7-8 breathing, where you
say that again. 4-7-8?
4-7-8, yes.
Say more about that.
So you start by opening your mouth slightly and pushing out all the air in your lungs. Then you close your mouth and inhale for a count of 4 through your nose. You hold the breath for a count of 7, and then you slowly exhale for a count of 8. And you can repeat that as needed. You also, if you're the kind of person that has a lower lung capacity and you can't push it out for a whole 8, push it for as long until your lungs kind of empty, and then you can start again. One more that is really effective, especially for stress, is to go in for 5, hold your breath for 5, and then a slow out count of 10. Generally, anytime your out breath is longer than your in breath, it sends a calming signal to the brain that you're safe. Because we have the time we don't have to breathe rapidly. We have the time to get that. These are really effective because you can do them. They take seconds. They also are kind of covert. If you're in a meeting and it's not your turn to speak, you could do these very covertly and nobody even knows that you're doing some of these breathing exercises because they're very internal and it really helps settle your nervous system. So a lot of these things we need to do ahead of time. This is one of the things that you could do in the moment even.
So how do you know between these 3, box breathing, that's the one I know and the one I often use with my clients is the 4 count, the
4-4-4.
Yes, correct. How do you know which one to use, whether you're using the 4-4-4 or the 4-7-8 or the 5-5-8-10?
So from my work with so many people, I find everybody is different and everybody's different. So I have my go-to 3 or 4 exercises that I ask my clients to experiment with. I'll give them a few days and I say, do each of these throughout the day and see which one actually makes you feel calmer.
Okay.
And everybody will have one that really sticks out to them or really helps. And that I find has to do a lot more with just literally physiology, like your lung capacity. For some, doing the 5-5-5 puts their system into, it feels stressful. And then for some people, the out for 10 is way too long and they run out of breath and that creates stress as well. So it's which one, when you do it, you actually feel like, oh, this, I actually feel a little calmer, a little more settled. All we need is just to take the edge off so we can get to the point where we can have a more rational conversation with ourselves. Another one that's really helpful is tapping or EFT, emotional freedom technique, because it connects physical signals with a lot of self-compassion type of mental conversation with yourself. And so that's a very quick one. In under 5 minutes, you can really settle your nervous system. And that's a good one that I recommend right before a big talk. That's something you could do in the 5-10 minutes before to get yourself settled. And lastly, the main thing is to give yourself some sort of release to the thing that your body is experiencing. So tapping is great for freeze. If you're in flight, right, it's fight, flight, freeze, maybe give it an opportunity to do the things it wants to do. If it wants to flee, can you run for a little bit? Can you do a couple jumping jacks? Can you dance it out for like a fast-paced song? Can you do some physical thing that is the equivalent muscles-wise to running away from the tiger, so it can just get the stress out of your body, and that brings us back to regulation. And another thing that's really helpful for people who don't have the physical space to do that, but if you just have your office or even go into a bathroom stall before you talk, is progressive muscle relaxation, which is we just tense one part of our muscles and release, and we hold it very tightly and release, and we go through adding one more part of your body at a time. But the key is when you've gone to your whole body, add some visualization, because our imagination is really, really effective. Just like the threat response can't tell whether the threat is internal or external, it has a hard time differentiating reality from very, very vivid imagination.
What would we visualize at the time?
So this is a substitute for the fight response. If what you're feeling is more frustration, aggression, then once you are squeezing all of your muscles at the same time, also visualize yourself fighting the source of your stress in the most vivid way that you can. Like really, and you just hold it and get all the tension in your body and imagine that you are fighting the manifestation of whatever it is that is stressing you out, whatever it is that's causing the fight response. And that gives the brain and the body the release it needs to feel like, okay, I fought the monster. I can calm down now. Even though all you did was sit in a chair and squeeze your muscles for a few seconds. So if you're adding the physical signals in addition to the imagination, it's very effective together. So these things can take a minute, 2 minutes, and we can go back to sort of a homeostasis kind of thing. That doesn't mean that the fear is completely gone, but we are no longer in a toddler tantrum mode. We now can have the compassionate conversation with ourselves and address the underlying issue that's holding us back. And this is where the tone of voice is so important. So a lot of the research shows that before we have the capacity for language communication, we communicate with other humans through touch, through body language, and through tone of voice, which is why your tone of voice changes almost everything in the way that you talk to yourself. You can say the exact same thing with a different tone, and your body will register it like a completely different thing. The difference between, why do I do that? To, why do I do that? If you want kind of a hack, always think, how can I talk to myself with compassionate curiosity? Because you might need to know. You might need to know why you do that in order to solve the problem, but you won't get an answer if you're attacking yourself with your tone. You will get an answer if you're coming at it with compassionate curiosity.
So if I'm hearing you, it's less judgment. You know how we can be self-critical. We're probably our own biggest critics. So instead of judgment, leaning into curiosity and compassion when something inadvertently goes wrong.
Exactly. So once we get our body out of survival mode, it's no longer a toddler having a tantrum, then we can have that compassionate curiosity conversation. Then I can say, hey, why am I so nervous about this talk? What is really under these nerves? Why do I feel like I'm not as confident as I should be? But asking it in a way that is truly compassionate and curious, usually something will come up or the answer will reveal itself, because now your brain feels safe to address the fear rather than feel attacked for having the fear in the first place.
You know, talking about that, something else that I'm thinking about around the changing nervousness into excitement. I know Daniel Pink popularized the concept, but somebody else came up with it. What is your take on, instead of trying to figure out, I wonder why I'm so nervous, switching that around or reframing that and saying, I'm so excited that I get to do this, that I get to do this presentation, that I get to lead my team, that I get to speak at this incredible conference.
Definitely. So I think that has a lot of value in my personal experience. Sometimes we use tools out of order and that can make them less effective. This is what I mean by that.
Okay.
You could just skip straight to reframing, which is what he talks about. It sometimes is more helpful, again, when we acknowledge what is actually happening. And then once the acknowledgement of, I'm afraid that if I am not flawless, then I will lose credibility. I'm afraid that if I trip up over my words, I will look unprepared. If that's the fear that's underneath, and now I acknowledge it.
Yes.
Now I can say, okay, well, do I need to be perfect in order to have the impact that I want to have? No. I can focus instead on this. I can reframe from there. And then I can say, now whatever remains here, whatever nerves remain here, that is just the excitement. But I've at least addressed the thing that is keeping my brain going back into survival mode, because if I haven't addressed it, it made it feel safe to put myself in that position again. I might have calmed it down, but next time I'm in that same situation, it's going to just trigger again the survival mode. So if I can then address the underlying issue, I might actually get to a point where I never get into survival mode in the first place, where I might have some butterflies in my stomach, but it never gets into a point where it's debilitating or actually taking away from you being able to perform at your highest potential.
This is so good, Lilach. I love the way you are reframing this and where you taking us basically a step back and saying, probably one of the most important things to do is acknowledging what is happening and understanding, or at least trying to understand the why. Why am I here? Why am I feeling the way I'm feeling, before moving into reframing the thought, the belief, or whatever the case may be. I really appreciate that. So one of the things that my listeners who are often in middle management, what they have to deal with is navigating, managing up to the executives, but also managing down. How do you see freezing, fight or flight or freeze happening? Is there a difference between when you have to do it for executives, because that's high stakes, but sometimes managing down, managing your people, showing up and having to share a message that's unpopular, having to share something that's hard to hear, that can also cause a woman leader to really want to just run for the hills or simply freeze in the moment.
Yeah, definitely. So I do think it's you can use similar tools for both, but this brings me back to one of the most common underlying things that lead us to freezing, which is that sense of perfectionism and being focused on the way that we are doing our job versus the impact that we're having on the people that we're speaking to. So, and it's something I think you agree with from what I've heard you say, where you want to focus on, okay, what do the leaders or the executives need to hear in order for you to be clear, in order for you to help them solve the problem that they're trying to solve? Taking the focus off of you and onto their needs really helps with both self-consciousness, perfectionism, any of that stuff, because now you are a solution to a problem instead of the messenger of the problem.
That's what I often call the meaning maker, being the meaning maker instead of simply just sharing a message, being the messenger of whatever's happening.
And there is a lot of science behind this, but also my experience with actors where when you are thinking about your own performance and how you are coming across in that way, where it's self-reflective constantly, that creates so much more nerves, and that creates a lot of that second guessing. You're in your head, you're not sure of yourself. And the best way to get out of that is to put your focus on what you're doing and how you're impacting the person that you're speaking to. So for example, when you talk about managing down, if you have to share some not great news, then thinking about, okay, how can I best serve my team in this moment? Will the lack of clarity do any good? Probably not. Usually, even when sharing difficult information, the clearer we can be about what went wrong and what the next steps are, that is actually helpful for people. It makes them feel safer. It makes them feel like they at least understand where they stand. And that becomes more helpful. Also, if you stay calm and you stay in that compassionate tone, almost to them, the way that you would hopefully speak to yourself, that helps them then process this difficult news that needs to come in. So as soon as I pivot the conversation from, oh, how will I tell them this? Or how will they think about me now that I'm telling them this bad news? Or what will they think about my leadership skills if something went wrong? Instead, if I put the focus on how do I make this conversation as easy and helpful to my team as possible. So if we have to go through something difficult, at least we'll go through it in an efficient and, effective way. Then all of a sudden it becomes easier because the focus is off of you and how you're going to be perceived rather than how am I impacting the people that I'm speaking to.
Yeah.
So that is, if you want to get out of your head, if you want to stop second guessing yourself, the best thing you can do is ask yourself, how am I serving the people that I'm speaking to? Or how am I helping make the situation slightly better? I'm not going to resolve everything. I'm not going to be the white knight that comes in and saves the day. But can I make a difficult moment slightly less confusing, slightly less difficult?
I really like that because it reminds me of what I often tell my clients, and that is when we are able to put ourselves in the shoes of our audience, the people who are listening to us, we are far more likely to show up intentionally and really serve them. So the same way when you were talking about, mindfulness, common humanity, and self-kindness, as I can see as this woman leader standing there thinking, how can I create that safety for my people when I have to share that difficult message with them, where maybe they move into fight, flight, or freeze? How can I bring them back to some form of regulation where they can hear what the message is, even if I don't have all the answers myself?
Exactly. Yes. And also just establishing that you see them and you hear them, feeling seen and heard by especially by a superior is really helpful. So acknowledging and this is again where acknowledgement is way more powerful than people give it credit
Agreed.
to. If you're acknowledging like, listen, I know today was hard, instead of trying to gloss over it, that creates so much trust from your team that then the rest of the message is received so much better. And that reframe also for yourself about this kind of ties in back to the reframing with excitement versus nerves and all that stuff. But it ties into it with reframing what is success and what is failure in this conversation. Because if success is having no bad days, then you are doomed to fail.
Yes, and yes. I want you to say that again because that is so important to remember and to remind ourselves.
Yes.
Can you say that again?
If your bench level for success is that you'll have no bad days, you are doomed to fail. Anybody, the most successful person that you know will have bad days, will have times where things go wrong. Failure is how we learn and how we grow. And so if we can reframe failure, as a learning opportunity and a way to get it better next time, but also reframe our success. Not that we need to be flawless, not that we need to be perfect, not that we need to have 0 bad days, but really think about yourself as the leader you want to be, ideally, in your ideal world, when things go wrong, not if things go wrong. How would you want to handle it? How was a good leader that you experienced handled a difficult situation that made it slightly better? And trying to bring that as your version of success. It's not that I won't have bad days. I will make sure my team is resilient in order to then grow and learn from whatever mistakes happen to then succeed on the back end of it.
That is so good. Before I let you go, if a woman listening to our conversation right now, what book or app or show would you recommend they listen to that will help them develop this internal resilience, into especially coming back to that mindfulness, calm and humanity and self-kindness? And then number 2, if they want to work with you, where can they find you?
So since I talked a lot about self-compassion and I am a huge believer in it, I do think it is something that changes the whole way that we not just speak to ourselves, but then what we're capable of, because it does create a lot of resilience. I would highly recommend Dr. Kristen Neff's book on self-compassion, and also for female leaders, Fierce Self-Compassion. Because I know there's a little bit of a misconception sometimes about, oh, I have to be like baby myself. That's not necessarily the case. So she also has a book about fierce self-compassion, where you get to use that language and that way that you speak to yourself in order to motivate better behavior.
Thank you. I will link to all of that in the show notes, so that if you are interested in making sure that you take a hold of this book and you start practicing self-compassion, or fierce self-compassion for that matter, you have a direct link to get hold of that book.
Yep. And then as far as for me, you can find me on LinkedIn, Lilach Mendelovich, or you can find me on my website, which is speak.lilachcoaching.com.
I will also link to Lilach's website and her LinkedIn. Lilach, you are so wonderful for sharing all those incredible tips with us. I cannot imagine how many notes I've taken today. And I can imagine that all my listeners have been taking notes. If there was one thing that you wanted to leave us with, what would that be?
I think just remember that even when there's something that's happening in your own body or your mind that's frustrating you, it's always coming from a place of trying to protect you. And can we be a bit kinder to ourselves in how we handle those moments? Because that will give you the ability to actually overcome them and get to where you want to go.
So good. Being kinder to ourselves and knowing that our brain is trying to keep us safe. So if we use that as the point of view, how can we show up for ourselves?
Yeah, befriending your fears, befriending your nerves instead of trying to ignore them or push them down. That is a big shift. I always say that like your nerves or your fears are just like children. So if you ignore them, they'll just get louder and louder until you can't ignore them anymore. What we resist persists. So really just reframing it to how can I befriend what is in my way? Because once I understand it and I make it feel safe, it will no longer be in my way.
That is really good. Thank you so much. I think what I'm taking with me is that befriending what's in my way is probably one of the quickest ways to get through that. Lilach, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation during Women's History Month. It's a perfect way for us to show ourselves some self-compassion and kindness.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for my conversation with Lilach. I am incredibly grateful to Lilach for bringing her expertise, her perspective, and heart to the conversation. I know you are walking away with so much to think about, and more importantly, so much to put into practice. Here's what I want you to hold on to from today's conversation. The freeze response is not a flaw. It is a feature of a high-performing brain that has not yet been given the right tools. And those tools, my friend, exist. The pre-talk strategies Lilach shared, the work of identifying your own brand of confidence, and the understanding of what your brain is doing in that high-stakes moment are things you can begin working on today. You don't have to white-knuckle your way through the next big presentation or critical conversation. You can prepare your nervous system the same way you prepare your talking points. Lilach has graciously offered her great and free resource in the Panic to Presence Guide, which lists a lot of the tools we talked about in the session today. You can find a link to the guide in the show notes, so be sure to grab it and start implementing her strategies immediately. So if you want to connect with Lilach and explore her coaching, you can find all of her details and her links in the show notes. And if today's episode resonated with you, share it with a woman in your life who's also a leader and in need of these same strategies. I bet she needs to hear this too. Until next Monday, my friend, I am Kele, reminding you that great communication is the foundation of inspiring leadership. Keep learning, keep growing, and remember to communicate to lead.